So, how are you all doing? Only me stop you from actually going to have some drinks in the expo hall, so sorry for taking the last half an hour of your time before getting drunk, right? We know that it's the most important part of any conference ever, right? This talk is very interesting because the story is for a very long time. I do it usually during my workshops, but it's very interesting story about the merchant with very specific needs. And I hope you will learn something new today from my presentation and we'll look into Magento development from a different perspective. So let me start first of all with obligatory introduction about me. So actually 2 weeks ago, I was in India and the guy over there asked me like, hey, how many years of Magento experience you have? And I was like, oh my goodness, like it's already 2000, it was in 2007 where I joined the first Magento core team. And now my experience can legally drink booze in Europe. So we have to drink for that today, later, right? Another thing, I like optimizing performance. So that's my bread and butter. I help merchants, agencies, technology partners as well. I'm not only doing PHP stuff, I also optimize Java applications. So this is one of my main things that I like to do because I hate slow websites, right? Everyone probably hates slow websites, right? You just abandon it. Another thing that I'm good at, unfortunately, and because of that, I have to deal with a lot of emergencies. Merchants calling me like, oh, we have this problem in production, our index is blowing up or something. Can you please take a look at it? And that's one of my other specialties. I'm basically a firefighter for Magento hosting and agencies. Another thing, I'm very passionate about open source. And my passion started with my first commits to Magento core back in 2007. So I'm one of the first 5 core developers who were working on a system. And now I look at whatever I wrote at that time, I'm not proud of it. Now I know like I would build everything differently. And this is one of the presentations of my reflection all over the years working with different merchants and pushing Magento to the limit. So let's start with a small story of 10 years ago. Right, so there was one customer. He contacted me on LinkedIn and said like, oh, Ivan, I just visited your talk at Meet Magento Netherlands. Like, I really enjoyed it. I want you to take a look at these things that we want to build. So what that customer asked me, he said like, I want something like Coolblue. For US market, Coolblue, not a lot of people know what it is, right? So Coolblue, at that time, in 2014, it was Amazon of the Netherlands. And the funny thing is it's actually still number 3 in the Netherlands, the biggest e-commerce website in the Netherlands right now. Amazon is number 4, right? So it still tells Amazon, no, 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 I'm still better than you there. I still buy all my stuff on Google. Yeah, so we have representative of Belgium here, who knows what I'm talking about. So back in 2014, Coolblue had only 360 million euros annual revenue. Today, they're 2.4 billion. And they have like 437 developers working on their technical infrastructure on their website every single day. And with a total headcount of 5.7 thousand employees in total. And the thing is, why I'm talking about the headcount, because the merchant told me like, okay, can you guess which of those amounts, probably there was a spoiler in the presentation, which of those amounts my merchant told me is ready to pay monthly for this big idea of Coolblue. By the way, if you didn't see on a Coolblue here, there is a screenshot, and here you see every single website has an own domain where they have like computer store, AGD store, they have laptop store, and so on. So every single product channel has own specific domain. And it was like unique at the time. They were growing on this business, and they grew quite well. But now they abandoned this idea, so it's not anymore. So I had to use Wayback Machine to find that. So here I was thinking like, okay, I built a lot of stuff on Magento, but this is interesting, right? Because merchant said like, oh, we're gonna go beyond 200 domain names. We have to make it work, right? So I was thinking like, okay, it's 299 euros at the time. The machine was not that good. For that money, you wouldn't be able to buy a good machine at that time. Now it's a little bit easier, but at that time it's only like 4 vCPUs, right? So you had very low amount of CPU power that was shared together with database, with Redis, with Varnish, everything on that machine, right? Another thing, I only had 8 gigs of RAM. Now, probably a lot of people smiling internally like, oh yeah, we have like 128 gigs and it's still slow, right? Another thing, I only had like 70 gigs of disk space, but disk space was not that big problem because mostly there was a lot of domain names, but there was maybe like 20K products in total. So not that many product images to worry about. Unless there was a couple of calls I remember from a long time ago when the merchant was calling me and saying like, oh, this log file is too big. So someone didn't set up log rotation. It was my mistake, of course. So this is a screenshot from 2016 when I was able to still recover the hosting provider that the merchant was hosted at to pull up the screenshot with the technical spec. So what were the requirements by the merchant? First of all, each domain has its own category structure, right? So for laptops, you would have 16-inch laptop, 14-inch laptop, Apple laptops, and so on. So you have like very interesting category structure. Also, products can actually be shared between domains. So you have laptops for study.com, or laptops for home.com, or laptops for office.com, right? And you can sell the same laptop in both of them. You just want to make sure that you have better category structure and better blocks all over to sell it better. Each domain also should have unique homepage and unique logo, right? Because we need to give customer a feel that, hey, it's specific store. It's like you go to, let's say, Best Buy, and Best Buy has specific departments there inside of the store where there is a specific person that can help you to find the right product. So the idea of every single website was you have that person, but in a homepage, right? So that person will tell you, hey, here, let's say, the best top 10 smartwatches you can buy right now. And then you can directly go and buy it from there. Another thing that is, I don't cover in this talk exactly specification how I did implement it, but another idea was for the merchant, he actually wanted to have a shared shopping cart, so you could still jump over the domain names. I can say that it was a painful experience with Safari at the time. So I had to do a lot of playing around with that. So let's first look at what we all think when we start developing something on Magento. I call it Magento way, trademarked, right? So what we would do in standard Magento implementation, right? We would create a laptop website. We'll create a laptop store group inside of Magento. Inside of that laptop store group, right, we're gonna have this laptop store, laptop root category. Then you would have desktop website, desktop store group, and then the list of categories. And each of those multiplied by 200, right? Do you think it's gonna be fast to index? No, right? You already see a problem here. You don't even need to create all those websites to already feel pain, right, of running it in production. So the major drawbacks, the index table size before 2.2 Magento version, right? So before 2.2, all the data was in one single table. So you were not able to query it efficiently on the front end. Luckily, Magento fixed it after 2.2. So now we have a lot of tables, which is also actually not good, because then some indexes actually don't stay in memory, right? We're gonna have MySQL putting some of the data through mmap from file storage into RAM and read efficiently. But when you have a lot of tables, there is very low chance that you're gonna have something staying in RAM for a long time. So we will have very slow database queries. Extra long indexation time, right? So for each store, for each website, we need to run own indexer, and Magento has some way to parallelize this process, but then you have to have more CPUs. We have only 4, right? So we cannot achieve that, unfortunately. And another problem here as well, that with extra long indexation time, your updates are going to be quite slow to the production system, right? But you want quickly, hey, I want to create this new domain. Oh, you have to wait a couple of hours. Maybe we should postpone it till weekend or something. So you cannot respond to the market changes or new product releases you want to launch, right? Imagine like you could create a separate domain name specifically for the new iPhone launch. And you prepare everything, and at some last moment, Apple changes the price. You have to update it on your website, but you cannot. You have to wait for indexation to finish, right? Annoying. Another thing, sorry? I think I heard someone was asking a question, but no problem. So another thing is we have MySQL buffer size as well, right? The more tables we have, the more memory we have to use for MySQL to run the server efficiently. So that's a little bit of a problem, right? Another thing is unnecessary data duplication. Every single website, every single store group, every single store view is given an opportunity for some store manager go into admin panel and incidentally edit the value in some other store view. And then you have the default value, then in that domain, and then another domain, and so on. Another thing that is also a problem, it's not directly to Magento related, it is infrastructure related, because when you have a lot of domain names you have to resolve in Nginx, you might hit a limit with map statement, and then you have to modify this parameter. So let's say you have 1,000 entries here, so it's a little bit exaggregated, but to show you why it's bad. So if you have like 1,000 entries here, then Nginx will try to find the perfect hash map value on a startup. And that process can take a very long time. So every single time you add a new domain name, it will take much more longer for Nginx to restore it. And it might also be slower to respond to the website as well, because you just need to provide this mage run code in Nginx. So you would adjust those values, and there is no formula for those values, so you would have to guess them, try, change, see, does it make an impact? Oh no, okay, I have to go and back, change it again. So let's step back a little bit and think, hey, do we actually need all of this stuff? Ask yourself a question, right? Do you need a multiple website for running multiple domains? I think it's not needed at all, because the products are not different. Only we choose which products are shown there. Another question is, do we need multiple store groups? Right? We probably need multiple store groups, but we have another way to do it, right? So the multiple store groups, we needed to have a different category tree to show products, right? That's why we need multiple store groups. But there is a small trick on a later slide. And another one, do we actually need multiple store views? Oh, this one is just pure data duplication. We don't need it at all, right? Usually you need multiple store views if you want to duplicate languages. So when you have actually to have separate data per each language. So there is a better way that came in my mind. One of that is, hey, what if instead of creating separate root categories, what if we just treat our current category tree structure differently, right? What if we create something like, hey, there is laptop store Anchor category. You just set a flag to Anchor is true. And there is desktop store first level category. But there is nothing else. It's still one single root category. And then we just map those domain names to those first level categories inside of Magento. So what would happen in this case? We don't have data duplication issue because now category 3 is still the same. It's just getting a little bit more complicated to match it at the runtime. But that's not a big problem because we can create these two tables. And one of those tables is going to be our domain scope. Inside of this domain scope, we can say, hey, which category is going to be mapped to which domain. And then we can also use the same tree of categories on multiple domains. We can just filter out the products that we don't want to show there. Another one is config, right? What if we want to change the logo? We just change the configuration value in Magento. So we can, at runtime, we can change the values in Magento just by detecting which domain name we are coming from. Hey, then we put a plugin on top of a configuration object in Magento and return different configuration values. You don't need separate website for that. Another thing is filters. So let's say you want to limit products that are visible there. So you add some additional filters for specific domains. And then for this domain scope, we actually have the domain itself. And domain itself is just in case if your customer says, hey, you know, like after half a year of working on a project, we decided to expand into Belgium. So we want to offer also French language. And in that case, you would create laptopforstudy.be with French language option available. So you need to map now two domains to the same tree structure, but you will have two different translations of the product data. And in such a way, you save yourself a lot of time redoing everything by just adding the store ID field here. And you specify domain, and you specify the scope, which is going to be used for this domain. So when you're matching the request against the domain, you know which configuration and which filters to apply and which category to substitute. So why it's better than the Magento way of doing things? First of all, category 3 can be shared very easily. And you don't need to run reindexation to share a category 3 if you add a new domain, right? You can basically instantly create a new domain and it's going to be available. You don't need to wait for Magento to reindex the whole catalog. Another thing is there is no duplication of indexation data because the impact of adding, let's say, 10 more categories is much more smaller than adding one more store view. Also, the database size is going to be much more smaller. So MySQL is going to be performed better, and we still can run it on 8 gigs of memory available on our instance. So instant domain addition, I just mentioned it. Another thing, it's also going to be easier to manage products. So imagine if the actual catalog manager goes into the admin panel and he says, oh, I want to now make this product available on another domain. So I have to switch to that website and click checkbox enable, right, to make this product available. That's too many steps. With this approach, they can just click a checkbox on a category and product is available in that domain. So a little bit of boring stuff, if this one was not boring to you, all right? First of all, which customizations you can do right now in Magento 2 to achieve it. So everything starts in Magento from processing request, right? So there is this plugin that Magento has in store module called request preprocessor. What I have to do to make it possible, I have to add an around plugin around the functionality that this one customizes, right? So it customizes front controller. So my around plugin has to have higher precedence. That's unfortunate. It happens like that because before plugins don't work for around plugins. So you have to create another around plugin to take precedence. And what will happen in this case? We will match the domain name in a request we will use the service model to look up the information about the domain, and we're gonna know which values we need to substitute in configuration, which values we need to substitute in store groups, and so on. The other thing, then, we pluginize this method in Magento, get root category ID. Magento uses it everywhere, so as soon as you substitute this value, then Magento will show completely different menu on the front end. You don't need to do much changes. Also, it will use the same value for other database queries where root category is used. Another one is, of course, configuration. So you would have to add an after plugin on configuration itself to substitute configuration values based on your domain. So you could show different logo, you could show different CMS homepage for that domain. Another thing I had to deal with as well that I found out is actually kind of slow in Magento, the category tree generation for top menu. There is like this like operation with a person sign in the end that is kind of inefficient for MySQL. So you would have to completely replace this method. Unfortunately, this method is not public, so you cannot pluginize it. So you have to add a preference through DI to replace this specific class. Another thing, if you also want to add additional filters for your domain, so let's say you have a domain called laptops for study, but you also have a domain Intel laptops for study. You don't want to create a new category tree for that. You just want to filter by brand, right? And then you only show Intel laptops on your website. So you could pluginize search adapter before it sends the request to Elasticsearch to add additional filters on a selection of the product. And the last two customizations. So as you know, Magento has URL rewrites. And this one was tricky to do because, right, then we have first level categories, and first level categories have own URL. So what I needed to do on before plugin here, when we try to resolve the request, because we basically remove this part from the URL related to the first level category, and we just show the second level category URL down the line. So we need, during finding the actual category page we need to show, we need to add this prefix before Magento executes this lookup. So we added a plugin before that. And another one, get URL itself on category, where we actually strip this prefix from the URL. And that's actually all customizations you need to do to Magento to make it possible. I've tried to create for you a small demo of the setup. Unfortunately, my price indexer doesn't have any records in it. I tried to fix it today, but it didn't work. But I can show you the category structure, at least in the admin panel. So let's take a look at that. So here is my catalog of just 171K products. Not that much, right? And here is my categories. So I got something on Hugging Face. So there is open dataset from Amazon products. I've downloaded all of those images on my laptop for all of these products. Oh, okay, yeah. My session. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Someone was joking before the talk. Hey, your admin panel won't work. So let's see. Will it work or not? Is it calling home now? Okay. So I have a full category tree here, and you can see I have a lot of different categories. So you can see I have computer accessories, computer components. Here I have external components, internal components, and so on. Each of them has a lot of products in it. Yeah, let's see, reset filter, yeah. Magento sometimes shows weird stuff. Like I expect to see products, but you have to click reset filter to see products there. And here you can see there's a lot of products assigned to it. And that happens for every single domain I'm actually have on this instance. After the talk, I'm gonna deploy it to my development server to play around. So after the conference, when I'm gonna deploy the slides, you're gonna test it for yourself with different domain names. I really wanted to do a live demo, but live demo always fails. So that's the thing. Let's switch now to the last part. It's to thank you for listening to my talk. I really enjoyed your company. You can access slides later by this URL. And if you need help or have questions, here's my email address.
And here we are. Yes, let's thank Ivan for the insights. If anyone has any questions so far, so this is the time. Of course, Mark has a question. Let me give you a mic.
Thanks, great talk. It makes us question everything, which is great. You mentioned this is for 200 sites. I have to think it would be useful for sites that have less than 200 domains as well. So where do you think the threshold would be where you would go down the path of doing something like this?
Yeah, so the first thing, I had a slide, right, where you should ask yourself, do you need a website, do you need a store group, or do you need a store view, right? So when do you need a store view? You need a store view when you have different data on a product level that changes, right? If you have the same products without product data changing, you don't need a store view. You better create maybe an additional attribute that's going to be just a filter condition somewhere. So it's like, a thing is, Magento for a long time was having this default documentation where everyone was following, hey, you want to have this use case? Hey, we can use store views, we can use websites and so on. Magento had even like diagrams on original Magento website, how to set it up. Right? It was like a default approach, but there is of course drawbacks to it that are never told when you try to do it. Right? And a lot of developers, for instance, 2 weeks ago, I had a training in India, and some of the developers said like, you know what? We never thought that we actually can create another entity, right? we never thought we can create our own table and do some kind of custom runtime resolution, and it actually can be faster, So a lot of times we are sitting in our own bubble, and we are only using what's available to us, instead of stepping back a little bit and thinking, hey, is it actually the right solution for my problem? Because sometimes just creating 2 more tables can save you a lot of headache later on.
Okay, so let's thank Ivan once again.
Thank you very much, everyone.